An alien girl caught in an ancient booby trap was willing to do anything to escape. Kale certainly didn't know that when he'd rappelled into the crystalline fissure on Xylos IV, seeking rumored geothermal vents for his struggling terraforming project. He was just a survivalist, tough and pragmatic, his hands calloused from coaxing life from dead rock, his heart a bit bruised, but functional. The fissure had led him not to heat, but to a network of ancient, collapsed tunnels, choked with glittering dust and humming with a low, unsettling energy. Curiosity, the bane of all sensible survivalists, had gotten the better of him. He'd followed the hum, deeper and deeper, until he stumbled into a chamber that felt less like a natural formation and more like a stopped heart. And there she was, suspended in the center of the chamber, held by shimmering bands of light that pulsed with the same hum, was a being unlike anything he'd ever seen. Tall, slender, her skin a mosaic of shifting colors that seemed to map her internal state. Right now, a frantic, shimmering crimson and deep violet. Strange, elegant armor covered parts of her body, etched with symbols that mirrored those glowing faintly on the wall. She struggled against the bands, her movements fluid and desperate, but they held fast. Her eyes, large and multifaceted, locked onto him the moment he cleared the entrance. A torrent of clicking, chiming sounds burst from her, laced with something that sounded universally like panic. He raised his hands, palms out. "Whoa, hey, easy there. I don't want any trouble." The shimmering bands around her flared, and suddenly similar bands shot out from the walls, faster than Kale could react, wrapping around his own limbs, binding him taut. A sharp, clean pain lanced through his joints, followed by a sickening lurch in his gut. The floor beneath him hummed, vibrating up into his bones. He was suspended a few feet away from her, mirroring her trapped posture. "Well, damn," he muttered, testing the restraint. They felt less like physical objects, and more like compressed energy, resistant to his strength. "That's not ideal." The alien woman's sounds intensified, now mixed with what sounded like focused, frustrated clicks. She spoke a language utterly alien, but her intent was clear in her eyes. "What have you done?" He shook his head, the movement restricted. "Me. You were here first. I just walked in. Is this your place? Look, I'm Kale, human, peaceful explorer. Just got caught in your security system." He knew how stupid that sounded. This wasn't a security system. This felt ancient, deliberate, and steeped in power he couldn't comprehend. The crimson in her skin deepened to almost black in places. She shifted, and the bands tightened around her. A new sound emanated from her, low, mournful. Then, using clicks and tones, she spoke a few words that, astonishingly, resonated with something in his universal translator unit, filtering through the hum of the trap. "Intruder, trap of the ancestors. You activated it." Her voice was layered, like chimes played underwater. He focused on the translation. "I activated it by walking in? Seriously, what kind of booby trap is this?" The shimmering bands around him intensified their grip, pulsing in time with the ones around her. He felt a strange pressure behind his eyes, a sense of something reaching into his mind. The pressure behind his eyes intensified, a wave of cold dread washing over Kale. It felt like a probing, invasive presence. Beside him, the alien woman cried out, the sound ripped from her, not translated but raw agony. Her shifting skin flared blinding white for a moment before cycling through turbulent hues of violet and black. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed faster. "Hey," Kale yelled, ignoring the pain shooting up his arms. "What's happening? What is this thing doing?" She gasped. A rattling sound, her eyes wide with terror fixed on his. "It binds not just flesh, spirit, mind." The translator struggled with the concept, rendering spirit as cognitive anchor and mind as neural lattice. "What does that mean?" he demanded, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. He felt a sharp, specific pain in his chest right over his heart, and saw her flinch simultaneously, clutching her own chest. It links us," she whispered, the layered chime voice trembling. "At the core, to power the escape through the ritual. It demands two, one of the blood, one attuned." She trailed off, looking at him with an expression that was part fear, part something else. Something he couldn't read. Attuned? What did that mean? He was just a guy looking for heat vents. Linked? Like, buddy system link? He tried humor, but it fell flat in the humming chamber. The pain in his chest flared again, mirroring hers. It was physical, undeniable. He could feel her rapid heartbeat, feel a strange resonance with the pulse in his own veins. This is more than a buddy system, he ground out, jaw tight. Okay, blood, attuned, what's the ritual? How do we turn this thing off? Her shifting skin settled into a pattern of deep indigo and silver, perhaps a sign of forced calm or resignation. The ritual of twin stars, she said, her voice regaining some of its formal, resonant quality, though still strained. It is a myth, a forbidden protocol, used by the ancestors to escape ultimate confinement. It requires resonance, perfect synchronicity of being, and a shared intent. Her gaze caved to his chest, then hers. The trap enforces the bond, initiates the resonance protocol. We are now linked for it to progress. Kale felt a jolt of alarm far deeper than the physical pain. Resonance, synchronicity being, shared intent. This wasn't a mechanical problem he could solve with a multi-tool and some ingenuity. This was something ancient, biological, perhaps even spiritual. Resonance, he repeated, testing the word. So we have to resonate? What does that even look like? She hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable in her multifaceted eyes. I do not know the specifics, only the legends. The trap, it teaches, it compels, it will force the necessary state. The way she said force sent a chill down his spine. He didn't like being compelled, especially by an ancient alien death trap. Great, he muttered. So we're stuck in an ancient vibe machine until we resonate. And if we don't, a shadow crossed her face. Or perhaps it was just the way the chamber lights dimmed slightly. It draws energy, life force. If resonance is not achieved, the trap consumes both. To power the escape protocol, for one, but only if one survives the draining. It is a failsafe, a final terrible choice. She didn't need to elaborate. He understood. If they didn't figure this out, the trap would slowly drain them both, potentially leaving just one alive to escape, using the accumulated energy, a grim form of survival of the fittest, enforced by long-dead aliens. So we resonate, Kale said, the pragmatic part of his mind kicking in. Or we die. What are the steps? The trap must be doing something else besides linking our heartbeats. He felt the invasive probe behind his eyes again, deeper this time, brushing against something fundamental in his consciousness. He saw a flash of her memory, not a clear image, but a wash of emotion. Cold dread and ancestral duty. She flinched again. It tests, she murmured, confirming his sensation. It searches for compatibility, for the shared frequency. It will examine our memories, our fears, our deepest needs. He swore under his breath. Shared frequency. Memory probes. This was getting weirder and more dangerous by the second. It searches for compatibility, for the shared frequency. It will examine our memories, our fears, our deepest needs. Her words echoed in the humming chamber, amplified by Kale's growing apprehension. Memories, fear. He wasn't exactly an open book, especially to ancient alien tech, and a complete stranger, albeit a stunningly unique one. The pressure behind his eyes intensified, moving past a simple probe to a more invasive, sifting sensation, like invisible hands rifling through his thoughts and experiences. He grit his teeth against the intrusion. Beside him, Zoraxis. He needed a name for her. Maybe he could ask her later, assuming they survived this cosmic speed dating ritual. Trembled. Her shifting skin was a riot of defensive colors, trying to push back the invasion. Can you stop it? He asked, his voice tight. She shook her head, the elegant movement restricted by the light bands. It is the mechanism. Resistance is counterproductive. It fights resistance. We must allow it, guide it. Allow it, Kale scoffed. Allow something to rummage through my brain like a garage sale. No thank you. A sudden sharp jolt went through him, and he saw a fleeting image, the empty expanse of space, the vast crushing loneliness that sometimes hit him during long deep space hauls. It was a vulnerable, private fear. The trap had found it instantly. He cursed under his breath. Okay, fine. Guide it how? Zoraxis seemed to gather herself, forcing the turbulent colors on her skin into a semblance of order, still deep indigo, but now edged with a steady silver line. Focus, she instructed, her voice firmer. Think not of resistance, but of shared purpose, of survival, of the goal. The trap seeks common ground, a point of resonance, common ground with a ritual-bound alien heiress trapped in a forbidden ancient booby trap. His common ground was wanting to get the hell out of here and back to his sputtering terraforming project. Hers was, what? Fulfilling an ancient prophecy? Escaping rival bloodlines? Our goal is the same, Kale stated. Escaping, getting out of this glorified microwave oven. She gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Escape, yes. Focus on that shared intent. Project it. Imagine the outside. He closed his eyes, picturing the dusty, breathable atmosphere of Xylos IV. The pale sun in the sky. He focused on the feeling of freedom, the simple act of walking unconstrained. Beside him, he felt her focus shift. Instead of dusty air and a pale sun, he felt an echo of cold, star-strewn space, a desperate longing for the void, and something else, a profound sense of ancient responsibility, a duty owed to silent, judging ancestors. Their images clashed in his mind, like two different radio frequencies, trying to occupy the same space. The trap pulsed unhappily, the pressure increasing. It's not working, Kale said, opening his eyes. Our shared intent is apparently incompatible. It is not simply the image, Zoraxis explained, the strain returning to her voice. It is the emotional core, the reason for the escape. Why do you seek freedom? Kale blinked. Why? That was easy. To live, to build something, to not die stuck to a wall by magic light bands. He felt a brush against his consciousness again, and a wave of his life washed over him. The hard scrabble colony he grew up on, the loss of his family to a blight, the relentless work of terraforming, the quiet satisfaction of seeing green shoots emerge from barren soil, his deep-seated need to create life, to survive and build, to leave a mark against the crushing indifference of the universe. The trap absorbed it, weighing it. Then, it turned to Zoraxis. Kale felt the invasive probe sift through her, and this time, the echo he received was clearer, sharper. Not images, but pure feeling. The heavy weight of expectation, a millennium of tradition pressing down, the fear of failure, the burning need to prove worthy, not for herself but for her lineage, for the survival of her people, even if it meant facing forbidden truths in a cursed chamber. Her why was tied to something vast, ancestral and far more complex than his. Their emotional cores were fundamentally different. The trap pulsed ominously, the light bands flickering. We are not attuned, Zoraxis stated, stating the obvious. The shared frequency requires a deeper merge of purpose or being. A deeper merge. What did that entail? The trap gave them a hint, a sudden, forceful connection that didn't just link their heartbeats, but their senses. Kale gasped as his vision swam, overlaid with strange shifting patterns of light and shadow that mirrored her skin. He could feel the texture of the metal beneath her arm, the distant hum of her own internal processes. He could almost taste the dry metallic air, filtering through her respiratory system. It was overwhelming, intrusive, and profoundly unsettling. The forced sensory link was disorienting, a chaotic flood of alien input overlaid on his own. Kale saw with two sets of eyes, felt with two sets of skin, heard with two sets of something that wasn't ears. Zoraxis's world was a symphony of subtle energies and vibrations he'd never perceived. He felt the faint tremor of something moving in the tunnels outside. Something large. He felt the ancient, slow pulse of the chamber itself, like a slumbering beast. And he felt Zoraxis's own reaction to it all. Her innate sensitivity, her cultural filtering of these sensations, her ingrained discipline fighting against the sheer invasiveness of the connection. This is too much. Kale ground out, trying to blink away the overlapping visual noise. His head swam. Zoraxis, though visibly straining, seemed slightly more equipped to handle it, perhaps due to her alien physiology or cultural conditioning. Her skin shifted rapidly between turbulent colors. The trap forces empathy, she murmured, her voice a little steadier now that the connection was established, though still tinged with strain. It links our senses, our emotional state, to find the resonance point. We must find harmony, not just shared purpose, but shared feeling. Harmony? While being wired together like some kind of biological circuit board? Okay, alien lady, Kale said, forcing himself to breathe through the sensory overload. Harmony, feeling. How about we start with a name? I'm Kale. She flinched slightly at the direct address, perhaps unaccustomed to such informality while linked at a fundamental level. Zaraxis, she replied after a moment's pause. Of the Linean bloodline. Linean bloodline sounded important, and possibly the source of the blood requirement for the trap. Okay, Zaraxis of the Linean bloodline. Glad to meet you, I guess. So how do two people find shared feeling when one is a human mechanic from a dustball colony and the other is, well, he felt a faint ripple of what might have been amusement from her side of the link. A delicate chime buried beneath the chaos of shared sensation. The trap facilitates, she said. It amplifies emotional states, broadcasts them across the link. We will experience each other's core self. As she spoke, the sensory input shifted again, becoming less about raw data and more about emotion. Kale felt a sudden wave of profound loneliness that wasn't his own, a deep, ancient isolation that seemed to stretch back generations. It was Zaraxis's, the burden of her lineage, the solitude of her ritual-bound path. He also felt a fierce, protective love for something abstract and vast, her people, her culture, their history. And beneath it all, a tremor of fear, not for herself, but for the consequences of failure, for the shame it would bring upon her ancestors. It was a complex, heavy emotional landscape. Zaraxis, in turn, felt a different kind of loneliness from Kale, not ancestral but personal, the quiet ache of a man who had lost much but kept building, the self-reliance born of necessity. She felt his frustration at mechanical problems, his quiet satisfaction in simple accomplishments, his dry humor as a shield. She felt his deep-seated weariness, but also an enduring, stubborn hope. It was simpler, perhaps, but no less profound. The trap seemed to feed on these shared emotional streams, the light bands around them pulsing with increasing intensity. They were being forced to confront the most vulnerable parts of themselves, reflected in the mirror of another being's soul. It was terrifyingly intimate. Okay, Kale said, his voice softer now. The shared emotions were cutting through his usual defenses. Okay, I feel some of that. The loneliness, the duty. He hesitated. It's heavy. Zaraxis gave another small nod. And I feel your resilience, your drive. It is unfamiliar. She paused. The trap seeks congruence. Where our emotional landscapes overlap, we must focus on those points, amplify them. Congruence, overlap. Where did a pragmatic human and a ritualistic alien possibly overlap emotionally? Survival, maybe. The fear of death. But the trap seemed to want more than that. It wanted unity of being. A shared heartbeat wasn't enough. Shared senses weren't enough. They needed to merge their very souls, or so it felt. The pressure in his chest crented. Tighter this time. A physical manifestation of the trap's demand for emotional alignment. The trap's demand for emotional alignment felt like a physical vise on their chests. Kale could feel his own anxiety mixing with Zaraxis's deep-seated fear of failing her lineage, creating a suffocating blend. Okay, he said, trying to focus, trying to find that elusive congruence. We both want out. We both don't want to die here. That's common ground, right? Zaraxis pulsed with unease through the link. It is bass. The resonance requires elevation, a higher frequency, not just survival, but purpose. Shared why. Kale sighed. His why was simple. Live. Her why was tied to millennia of history and duty. How did they bridge that gulf? The shared sensory input flickered, showing him not just her physical form, but a layer of shimmering internal light that pulsed within her. It was her life force, her consciousness, vibrant and unique. He felt a similar internal light within himself, less ethereal, more grounded but equally distinct. The trap seemed to be trying to make these two internal lights pulse in unison. What if, Kale began, an idea forming, sparked by the shared vulnerability they were experiencing. What if the purpose isn't about our individual whys? What if the shared purpose is each other? Zaraxis' skin shifted, a sudden startled pattern of gold spreading through the indigo and silver. He felt a jolt of surprise from her side of the link. Each other? She echoed, the concept alien to her structured mind. As the purpose, yeah, Kale pressed, feeling a strange conviction settle over him. This wasn't just about escaping, it was about enduring it together. Right now, our purpose is keeping the other one alive, relying on the other one. We need each other to get out of this. That's a purpose, a shared one. He focused on that feeling, the unexpected sense of reliance, the faint thread of connection he felt with this strange, trapped woman. He wasn't alone here. Neither was she. He pushed that thought, that feeling, down the link, towards Zaraxis. He felt her receive it, process it. There was resistance at first, a recoil born of ingrained emotional restraint and cultural rules. Purpose was external, ancestral, not interpersonal. But the trap, demanding congruence, seemed to seize on his concept. The pressure eased slightly. The shimmering light bands softened their grip. The shared sensory input became less chaotic, more focused, highlighting the connection between them rather than just flooding them with raw data. Zaraxis took a shaky breath. The trap acknowledges it, she murmured, a note of wonder in her voice. A shared purpose of mutual guardianship. It is resonant. Mutual guardianship. He liked that term. It felt solid, real. The shimmering light within Zaraxis became steadier, pulsing with a rhythm that was beginning to sync with his own internal light, which he could now perceive faintly. The resonance was building. Okay, Kale said, focusing intently. Mutual guardianship. We're doing this together. We're getting through this together. He projected that thought, that commitment, across the link. He felt her receive it, and felt a fragile, hesitant return of the same energy. The light bands around them flared brightly, no longer painful, but warm, almost comforting. The humming in the chamber rose in pitch, becoming a clear, resonant tone. Then the trap introduced a new element. The light bands around Zaraxis' wrists and ankles dissolved, leaving her free, but a single, thicker band remained, encircling her waist, still connected to the chamber's central mechanism. The bands around Kale remained. He was still trapped. Zaraxis looked at her freed limbs with astonishment, then back at Kale, her multifaceted eyes filled with sudden understanding and dread. The trap hadn't freed them both. It had freed one. The trap had freed Zaraxis, but not him. The single thick band around her waist pulsed, a glowing tether still connecting her to the humming mechanism in the floor. Kale remained bound, the light bands now feeling less like restraints and more like anchors. Zaraxis stared at her free hands, then at him, her skin shifting rapidly through a spectrum of shock, fear, and dawning comprehension. It has chosen, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The ritual of twin stars, it requires a sacrifice, or a catalyst. One is released to complete the final step, while the other, she trailed off, looking at the bands that still held Kale. Her words from earlier came back to him. If resonance is not achieved, the trap consumes both. To power the escape protocol, for one, resonance had been achieved, based on his idea of mutual guardianship. But it seemed that wasn't the final step. The trap still demanded a price, a fuel source. The failsafe, Kale said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. It's using me as the power source. The thick band around Zaraxis' waist pulsed, and he felt a faint drain, a subtle leaching of energy from his own body, channeled through the link to her. It wasn't painful yet, but it was undeniable. No, Zaraxis protested, taking a hesitant step towards him, though the tether around her waist prevented her from reaching him. Her skin was now a swirl of desperate blues and greens. This is not the fail-safe. This is the final ritual stage. The release is conditional. To open the path requires the complete resonance, the merging Merging, the word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implication. The sensory link flared again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just senses or emotions. It was him. His consciousness, his very being felt stretched thin, reaching across the short distance to Zaraxis, drawn by the pulling force of the trap, and he felt Zaraxis reaching back. Not just pulled, but actively responding, drawn by the thick band around her waist. The focus point of the ritual. The light within him pulsed stronger, mirroring the intensifying glow within her. The ambient hum of the chamber rose again, becoming a high-pitched, almost musical tone that resonated deep in his bones. Zaraxis's eyes were wide, fixed on his. The trap, it demands the full sync, she breathed, her voice trembling. The pulse resonance, to unlock the escape path, the two must become one frequency. It is the final test, the ultimate expression of the bond. The ritual of twin stars. She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. The legends hadn't just spoken of escape. They had spoken of bonding, deep, irrevocable bonding. He felt the energy drain accelerate, a dizzying lightness in his head. He was weakening, slowly being consumed by the trap to fuel Zaraxis's escape, or the merging itself. Zaraxis looked down at the thick band around her waist, then back at Kale, her expression hardening with resolve. The fear was still there, but beneath it a fierce determination was building. Her skin settled into a vibrant, burning gold, edged with the steady silver. "I understand," she said, her voice gaining strength, becoming resonant like the chamber's hum. "The ancestors' wisdom was absolute. Release is earned through unity." She met his gaze, and through the link, Kale felt a wave of intense emotion from her. Not just fear or duty, but something new, something powerful and focused. It was acceptance. Acceptance of the trap's demands, acceptance of the ritual's true nature, and acceptance of him as her counterpart in it. "Kale," she said, using his name, making it sound strangely beautiful in her layered voice. "The trap requires our full resonance. It requires the merging. To survive to complete the ritual, we must become one frequency, one being." The thick band around her waist pulsed violently, pulling her slightly towards the central mechanism. She didn't resist. She held his gaze, her eyes reflecting the intensifying light of the chamber. "Allow it," she commanded, not just with her voice, but with her entire being, her will projected through the link. "Focus your energy, join mine, resonate." It wasn't a request, it was a directive, delivered with the authority of her bloodline, the weight of her ritual obligation, and the desperate need for survival. He was the catalyst, the fuel, but also the other half of the equation. The trap was forcing their hand, pushing them towards an intimacy far beyond anything Kale had ever imagined. He was physically bound, weakening, while she was partially free, pulling him into an unknown, terrifying, and strangely compelling union. His mind, always pragmatic, screamed against it, but the drain was real. His body felt weak, and Zaraxis's focused intensity was overwhelming. He had no choice. He had to resonate. He had to resonate. Kale focused, not on the fear, not on the drain, but on the fragile thread of connection they had built. The mutual guardianship, the shared purpose of survival. He allowed his internal light, his consciousness, to flow towards Zaraxis, guided by the invisible currents of the trap and the pull from the band around her waist. As their energies mingled, the chamber's hum became a roar, and the light bands around Kale dissolved completely. He wasn't free to move, though. He felt held by an invisible force, drawn inexorably towards Zaraxis. The thick band around her pulsed, and she seemed to vibrate with contained power. Their forms, suspended in the center of the chamber, began to blur at the edges, shimmering like heat haze. The sensory link wasn't just sensory anymore. It was a merging of consciousness. Kale felt Zaraxis's presence inside his own mind, a cool, ordered stream of data and emotion. He saw flashes of her memories, not chosen but fundamental, the ancient towers of her city, piercing a sky of swirling gas, the weight of a ceremonial garment, silent judgment of elders, the cold beauty of the star charts studied alone in sacred hall. He felt her grief for losses he didn't understand, her longing for connections she was forbidden. And Zaraxis felt him, the raw, chaotic energy of human emotion, the jumble of practical knowledge, the sting of personal loss, the stubborn, messy hope that defied logic. She saw images of dusty plains and simple shelters, felt the grit of soil under his fingernails, the ache of physical labor, the uncomplicated desire to simply live and build. The merging was overwhelming, a collision of worlds within their shared consciousness. The trap wasn't just making them resonate. It was weaving them together at a fundamental level. It wasn't sex in any way he understood, but it was profoundly intimate, a union of mind and spirit enforced by ancient technology and ritual law. He felt a surge of energy, not his own, flowing into him from the trap, mediated by Zaraxis. It was the power being generated, not by draining him, but by unifying them. This was the resonance. This was the ritual of twin stars. They were becoming one frequency. The chamber's light flared, blindingly bright, casting no shadows. The humming reached a crescendo that vibrated in his soul. He felt a tearing sensation, not of pain but of separation, as the last vestiges of his independent consciousness were braided with hers. And then, stillness. The blinding light receded, leaving behind a soft, ethereal glow. The humming faded to a gentle thrum. Kale found himself standing on solid ground. The light bands were gone. Zaraxis stood beside him, no longer tethered by the thick band. It too had dissolved. But something had changed. He could still feel her presence, intimately linked to his own, a constant murmur of her thoughts and emotions beneath the surface of his own awareness. And he knew she could feel his. Their skin still shimmered faintly, reflecting the chamber's glow, and he saw that subtle patterns, mirroring the symbols on the walls, and Zaraxis's armor were now etched onto his skin, glowing with the same ethereal light as hers. They were faint, but undeniable, a bond mark. Zaraxis looked down at herself, her skin now a stable, serene pattern of silver and deep gold. She raised a hand, touching the glowing symbols on her arm. Then, the resonance is complete, she breathed, the layered chime of her voice now carrying a new depth, a new resonance that mirrored his own internal state. The merging, the ritual of twin stars. It is done. He felt her awe, her shock, and something else, a profound sense of altered destiny. They had survived. They had escaped the immediate threat of consumption. But they hadn't simply been freed. They had been fundamentally changed, linked in a way that transcended physical proximity. He was no longer just Kale, the human survivalist. She was no longer just Zaraxis of the Lenian bloodline, trapped heiress. They were twin stars, and the world outside this chamber, the world Zaraxis knew, was about to react to their forbidden, ritualistic union. The external threat he'd felt earlier was still out there, closer now, drawn by the surge of energy from the completed ritual. They had escaped the trap, but stepped into a larger, more dangerous one. The external threat hit the chamber doors moments after the light faded. A deafening blast of energy tore through the entrance, sending ancient dust and debris raining down. Figures swarmed into the room, their armor dark and angular, weapons spitting bolts of crackling energy. They were Zaraxis's rival bloodline, or perhaps the corrupted priesthood she'd hinted at, alerted by the massive energy surge of the resonance ritual. Their eyes, visible through narrow visors, were fixed on Zaraxis, then on Kale, their gazes narrowing as they took in the faint, glowing bond marks on their skin. "The ritual is complete," one of the figures snarled, its voice distorted by a vocoder. "The heiress has bonded with an outsider." Kale didn't hesitate. The shared consciousness, the intimate link, allowed them to react with unnerving synchronicity. He felt Zaraxis's intent: defend, evade, escape, and his body responded instantly, anticipating her movement. He grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a fallen stone pillar as energy bolts whizzed past where they had stood moments before. His survival instincts, honed by years of living on the edge, were now amplified by Zaraxis's innate agility and knowledge of the chamber's layout. "They know," Kale stated unnecessarily, peering over the top of the pillar. "Guess forbidden rituals aren't exactly low profile." He felt a flicker of dry humor from Zaraxis through the link, a surprising response amidst the chaos. The energy output was considerable, she conceded, her layered voice calm despite the incoming fire. The priesthood of the sundered moon tracks such events, especially those involving the bloodlines. The priesthood, right, the corrupted element. So, we're fugitives, Kale summarized, dodging another blast from your psycho priests. And maybe your rival family? They are one and the same, Zaraxis confirmed. The corrupted priesthood seized control decades ago. My bloodline resisted. This chamber, it was a sanctuary, meant to only be opened by the twin stars. But they sought its power and believed they could force the ritual. Zaraxis gestured towards a narrow fissure in the wall, hidden by ancient tapestries now tattered by the blast. That is the escape route, a service passage known only to my ancestors. Lead the way, Kale said, not needing to voice the command fully. Zaraxis was already moving, her steps light and fast. Kale followed, his movements echoing hers with uncanny precision thanks to the link. It was like moving with a perfect partner, anticipating every turn, every dodge. The invaders were fast, but the service passage was narrow, forcing them into single file, giving Kale and Zaraxis a temporary advantage. As they navigated the dark, winding passage, the shared consciousness proved invaluable. Zaraxis knew the path, its hidden traps and crumbling sections, while Kale's stale's awareness and physical strength allowed them to bypass obstacles efficiently. He felt her moments of fatigue and instinctively offered support, a hand on her back, guiding her through a tight squeeze. She, in turn, sensed his unfamiliarity with the alien structure and subtly adjusted her pace, warning him of sudden drops or unstable flooring, not with words but with a projected feeling of caution. It was a strange, silent dance, born of forced intimacy and shared danger. The bond mark on his skin pulsed faintly with every surge of shared energy, a physical manifestation of the link. He glanced at Zaraxis, beside him in the dim light. Her skin still glowed with the silver and gold patterns, a constant reminder of the irreversible ritual that had bound them. They were fugitives, pursued by a powerful enemy, linked by an ancient, forbidden magic, but they were also together. And somehow, despite the terror and uncertainty, that felt like a strength. They burst from the service passage into a vast, overgrown biodome, the air thick with the scent of alien foliage, and the distant sound of trickling water. This was an older section of the subterranean complex, abandoned long ago but kept alive by autonomous environmental systems. Giant, luminous flora cast an eerie glow, and strange, silent creatures rustled in the undergrowth. The sounds of their pursuers echoing in the tunnel behind him spurred them forward. "Where do we go?" Kale asked, his voice low, ready to spring. Zaraxis paused, her multifaceted eyes scanning the dense canopy above. "These domes were quarantine zones," she explained, her layered voice softer here, less formal, disconnected from the main complex. "There is a maintenance route leading to the surface shuttle bays. They are likely inactive, but perhaps salvageable." The sense of shared purpose, of mutual guardianship, remained strong through the link, a constant anchor in the alien environment. Kale felt her determination, her focus on escape, and it bolstered his own resolve. They moved through the biodome, their linked senses allowing them to navigate the treacherous terrain and avoid the passive but potentially dangerous flora. He felt Zaraxis's innate connection to this ancient wild place, a sense of deep respect for the life within it. He, in turn, offered his pragmatic knowledge of machinery and structure, his mind already cataloging potential resources and routes. The bond marks on their skin thrummed with their exertion, the faint glow intensifying slightly. They were a visible sign of their union, a constant reminder of the ritual and its consequences. As they pushed deeper into the biodome, the sounds of their pursuers faded, lost in the rustling leaves and chirping alien insects. But the danger wasn't gone. The corrupted priesthood would scour the complex. They needed to get far away, off-world if possible. Reaching the shuttle bays became their immediate, shared goal. They found the maintenance route, a series of crumbling walkways and ladder systems woven through the giant tree. It was precarious, requiring them to rely completely on each other. Kale used his strength to clear debris and stabilize shaky platforms, while Zaraxis used her agility and knowledge of the structure to find safe footholds and test unstable sections. At one point, a section of walkway gave way. Kale felt Zaraxis's panic through the link and reacted instantly, grabbing her arm, his muscles screaming as he held her weight, while she scrambled for purchase. The shared trauma, the near fall, sent a jolt through their connection, amplifying the emotions, the terror, the relief, the surge of adrenaline, and beneath it, a sudden, unexpected swell of affection. Not romantic yet, not consciously, but a deep protective warmth born of saving and being saved. Zaraxis looked at him after she was safe on solid ground, her eyes searching his. You held fast, she murmured, her voice quiet. The link, it enhances reaction. Kale nodded, catching his breath. Yeah, guess our resonance has its uses. He felt a warmth spread through the link from her side, something soft and fragile. We are well paired in this, she conceded, using her formal language but conveying a genuine sentiment through their shared consciousness. They continued towards the shuttle bays, moving with a new rhythm, a fluid coordination that felt natural, almost instinctual. The forced proximity, the shared danger, and the irreversible bond of the ritual were weaving them together, not just in consciousness, but in action and emotion. The intimacy was deepening, quietly, profoundly, amidst the struggle for survival. They reached the shuttle bays, a cavernous space filled with the hulks of ancient, dormant spacecraft. Dust motes danced in the faint light, filtering from vents high above. The air was stale, tinged with the smell of ozone and decay. Hope warred with despair as Kale's eyes scanned the derelict craft. Most looked like they hadn't flown in centuries. Any of these, Kale began trailing off. Zaraxis moved towards a craft nestled against the far wall, larger and less damaged than the others. Its plating was dull but intact. This was my ancestors' personal transport, she said, running a hand over its cold hull. The Twin Star, legend says it was shielded against priesthood surveillance. Perhaps it still functions. Kale felt a surge of cautious optimism from her through the link. His own pragmatic mind immediately assessed the challenges: power systems, life support, navigation, propulsion. Getting this ship running would be a monumental task, even for a skilled mechanic like him. It's a long shot, he admitted. Even if the core systems are intact, the seals, the fuel, the power transfer, it's a lot. But not impossible, Zaraxis stated, her voice firm. We have the resonance, the link. Perhaps the trap granted us more than just escape. She looked at him, her gaze intense. The legends spoke of the twin stars gaining insight, knowledge, from the merging. Insight, knowledge? Could the ritual have imprinted them with the information needed to activate the ancient ship? Kale focused, pushing through the link, asking the question without word. He felt Zaraxis do the same. They both reached towards the knowledge imprinted during the resonance. It wasn't like accessing a database. It was more intuitive, a sudden understanding flowering in their shared consciousness. Knowledge of the ship's power conduits, the sequence for primary ignition, the location of emergency fuel cells, long forgotten. It was fragmentary, mixed with symbolic, ritualistic understanding. But it was there. A wave of exhaustion washed over Kale as the knowledge settled. The merging had been a profound drain. He saw Zaraxis sway beside him. We know, he breathed, astonished. Or, enough to start. Zaraxis nodded, her eyes reflecting the newfound knowledge. The ritual provides, she murmured, but it exacts a cost. The link requires energy to maintain, especially here, away from the chamber's power source. She looked at the glowing bond marks on their skin, which had dimmed slightly. The resonance must be replenished. Nourished, replenished, nourished. How? Before Kale could ask, he felt a different kind of energy flow through the link, a gentle warmth originating from Zaraxis. It soothed the ache in his muscles, sharpened his focus. It was her own life force, offered through their bond. Zaraxis, stop, he said, alarmed. You'll drain yourself. It is required, she stated simply, to maintain the frequency. The twin stars sustain each other. She looked at him, and through the link, he felt a wave of vulnerability and trust, unlike anything he'd experienced. The emotional barrier she normally held up was lowered, dissolved by the merging. The bond requires closeness, she explained, choosing her words carefully, her skin now a soft, almost translucent silver. Physical proximity, shared stillness, to allow the energies to harmonize. She stepped closer to him in the silent shuttle bay, the air thick with anticipation. The danger outside was real, but in this moment, only the bond mattered. The ritual had forged them, and now it demanded they sustain that forging. Cale felt his heart pound, not just his own, but hers too, synced perfectly through their bond. The faint glow of their bond marks intensified slightly as they stood close, bathed in the dim light. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the consequences of the ritual, the demands of the bond. It was about sustaining the fragile, powerful connection that was now their shared reality. Physical proximity, shared stillness, to allow the energies to harmonize. Zaraxis's words hung in the stale air of the shuttle bay. The concept, delivered with her usual ritualistic precision, carried an undercurrent of raw vulnerability that rippled through their link. The danger outside was momentarily forgotten, replaced by the intense, charged atmosphere between them. Cale felt the truth of her words. The energy flowing between them, sustaining the bond, required closeness. The faint drain he'd felt earlier intensified when they were apart, for even short distances. Sustaining the resonance meant sustaining their physical connection. It wasn't just about proximity, though. He felt the trap's echo in their bond, a demand for a deeper kind of union to fully harmonize their energies, to nourish the link at its source. The knowledge gained from the ritual wasn't just information about the ship. It included an understanding of the bond's nature, its requirement. The ritual hadn't just linked their minds. It had linked them at a fundamental energetic level, one that mirrored the ancient mating rituals of Zaraxis's people, rituals intended to create perfect resonance between partners. Only this was enforced, accelerated, twisted by the ancient trap. Zaraxis took another step closer, until only a breath separated them. He could see the fine details of her multifaceted eyes, the subtle way her skin shifted patterns even in its current serene silver-gold state, a silent language only he could now read through their link. He felt her hesitation, her ingrained emotional restraint battling the imperative of the bond. But beneath it, he felt a profound trust, a quiet acceptance. He was the other half of the twin stars, chosen by the ancestors' trap, bound to her irrevocably. His human instincts, his pragmatic mind, warred with the overwhelming reality of their situation. This wasn't how relationships started. This was forced, bizarre, and incredibly dangerous. But the bond marks on their skin pulsed, drawing them together, demanding the harmonization their linked energies required. He felt a deep ache within him, a need that wasn't just physical but resonated with the core of his being, answering a similar need he felt amplified from Zaraxis. It was the trap's work, but it felt right, on some level he couldn't articulate. Zaraxis reached out a hand, her fingers brushing against the faint glowing symbol on his cheek. The contact sent a jolt through him, a spark of pure energy that flowed from her to him, replenishing something deep inside. Her skin warmed slightly under his touch. Through the link he felt her gather courage, her resolve hardening. The resonance required the full spectrum. She murmured, her voice barely a whisper yet resonating directly in his mind. Physical, emotional, energetic. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and vulnerable. To nourish the bond, to sustain the frequency, we must complete the ritual. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The ritual of twin stars wasn't just an escape mechanism. It was a bonding ceremony, forced by the trap. And the final step, the core of the pulse resonance sync and empathy-based memory merging, hinted at by the cultural rules, was a physical, intimate union. It was the point where two became irrevocably one, not just in spirit but in body. It was survival, yes, but it was also the culmination of everything the trap had forced them to share, their fears, their hopes, their vulnerabilities, their very beings. Kale understood the trap hadn't just linked them to escape. It had linked them to survive as the twin stars, a state that required constant, intimate harmonization. And that harmonization began now in the silent, dusty hold of an ancient starship, surrounded by the ghosts of Zaraxus's ancestors and the distant threat of her enemies. He reached out, gently cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her bond mark. "Okay, Zaraxus," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Let's complete the ritual. Let's complete the ritual." Kale's words were quiet, but carried the weight of acceptance, surrender to a fate far stranger and more profound than anything he could have imagined. Zaraxus leaned into his touch, her skin warming further, the silver and gold patterns on her face, shifting in response to the complex emotions flowing between them. Through the link, apprehension, necessity, a fragile thread of something akin to desire, born of forced vulnerability and shared survival. The air in the shuttle bay grew heavy, thick with the energy of their bond. The faint glow of their bond marks intensified, casting a soft, ethereal light on their faces. The ancient ship seemed to hum in response, a low vibration that echoed the resonance pulsing within them. The knowledge gained from the ritual surged in their shared consciousness, not just about the ship, but about the bond itself, its intricate requirements, its deep roots in Zaraxus's culture, its function in creating absolute unity. This wasn't just about sex as a biological drive. It was sex as a ritual, a key component of the energy exchange necessary to sustain the twin stars' frequency. It was an act of profound vulnerability, of laying bare not just the body, but the soul, allowing the two merged consciousnesses to find ultimate harmony through physical union. There was no fumbling, no awkwardness. The link guided them, their movements flowing together with an unnerving synchronicity, born of their merged state. He felt her innate grace, her reserved intensity, and she felt his raw, grounded passion, his cautious tenderness. It was an exploration not just of each other's bodies, but of their combined being, the two consciousnesses experiencing everything simultaneously, sharing every sensation, every emotion amplified and interwoven by the bond. The act was punctuated by gasps and soft cries, not of pain, but of overwhelming sensation, of boundaries dissolving, of becoming utterly, completely known to another. It was a dance of light and energy as their bond marks flared, mirroring the pulsing rhythm of their shared heartbeats. Kale felt Zaraxus's energy flow into him, replenishing the drain, not just physically, but filling a void he hadn't known was there. He felt her deep ancestral loneliness, finally eased, met by his own quiet resilience. He felt her duty transform from a heavy burden into a shared purpose. In Zaraxus, she felt the raw, unvarnished truth of a human soul, complex and beautiful in its imperfections, its capacity for fierce loyalty and simple joy. She felt her own structured world expand, embracing the unexpected chaos and warmth he brought. The ritual demanded their union, and in fulfilling that demand, they found something unexpected, a connection that transcended the trap's purpose, becoming something uniquely their own. When the intensity faded, they lay entwined in the dusty silence of the shuttle bay, bathed in the soft glow of their still pulsing bond marks. The link felt stronger now, richer, a comfortable presence in the back of Kale's mind. The exhaustion was still there, but it was different, mingled with a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. This was the post-sex function, an emotional reversal, a deepening of vulnerability, a commitment forged not just by shared trauma, but by shared intimacy, by the completion of a ritual that had bound them soul to soul. Zaraxus stirred against him, her head resting on his chest. He felt her emotions settling. The fear was still there, the knowledge of the danger they were in, but it was now overlaid with a quiet wonder. A sense of destiny shifted. The resonance, "It is complete," she murmured, her voice soft and layered. "We are truly twin stars." The bond marks on their skin gradually faded, no longer glowing, but still visible, etched faintly into their flesh, a permanent, visible reminder of the ritual, the trap and the union it had forced. They were bound. They were fugitives, but they were together. In the knowledge of the ship, The twin star pulsed in their shared consciousness. Waiting, they had completed the ritual. Now they had to survive its consequence. They worked on the twin star, guided by the intuitive knowledge granted by the ritual bond. It was grueling, dirty work, breathing stale air and maneuvering in tight spaces, but the shared link made them an incredibly efficient team. Kale's practical skills blended seamlessly with Zaraxis's ritualistic understanding of the ship's ancient systems. He felt her knowing exactly which sequence of ancient conduits to access, and she felt his mechanical intuition guiding his hands to the precise tool needed. They communicated without words, a constant flow of intent and information through their merged consciousness. They bypassed security protocols that would have stumped Kale and rerouted power distribution with a speed that amazed even him. The corrupted priesthood wouldn't expect them to get this ancient vessel operational. Certainly not this quickly. The bond sustained them, not just with shared energy, but with a deeper emotional support. Kale felt Zaraxis's quiet strength whenever his hope wavered. She felt his dry humor cutting through the tension, grounding her in the absurdity of their situation. They were twin stars now, irrevocably linked, their lives intertwined by a force beyond their control. Yet they were choosing to navigate it together. The physical intimacy of the ritual had broken down the last of Zaraxis's emotional barriers. She was still Zaraxis of the Linean bloodline, bound by duty and tradition, but she was also something more, a partner, a counterpart, deeply vulnerable and fiercely loyal. She no longer hid her fear or her longing from him. It flowed freely between them, met with understanding and acceptance. And Kale, the survivalist who had always relied only on himself, found unexpected comfort and strength in the constant, intimate presence of another being in his mind. The loneliness that had been a quiet constant in his life had vanished, replaced by the vibrant energy of their shared consciousness. They ate salvaged emergency rations side by side. The silence filled, not with emptiness, but with the quiet hum of their bond. They slept in turns, one resting while the other kept watch, their linked minds still connected, offering a sense of security neither had ever known alone. The corrupted priesthood's search intensified outside the biodome. Kale felt tremors through the ship's hull as they blasted through sealed passages, their distorted voices echoing faintly through the ancient structure. The time was running out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ship's primary systems flickered to life. Lights hummed, consoles glowed, and a low, steady pulse emanated from the core. They had done it, together, guided by the ritual, powered by their bond. As Zaraxis ran diagnostics on the ship's ancient weapons systems, designed, she explained, not for conquest, but for defense against energetic intrusions. Kale felt a new surge of determination from her. She wasn't just escaping, she was embracing her destiny as a twin star, ready to defend herself and her people, even if it meant defying the corrupted authorities. "The ship is ready," Zaraxis announced, her voice resonant with power and conviction. "We can leave this place." Kale nodded, looking out the reinforced viewport at the dark, overgrown dome. They had survived the trap, completed the ritual, and activated an ancient vessel, but the consequences of their union, of being the twin stars, were only just beginning. They were fugitives now, bound together, stepping out into a universe that would react to their forbidden bond. The journey wasn't over, it was just starting. And they would face it. Together, their bond marks a silent testament to the impossible connection forged in darkness. They lifted off from the ancient shuttle bay, the twin stars shaking off centuries of dust as its engines hummed to life. The corrupted priesthood was waiting outside the biodome entrance, their ships surrounding the area. But the twin star, true to Zaraxis's words, was shielded. They slipped past the enemy blockade, a ghost ship emerging from the forgotten depths of the world. The priesthood ships scattered in confusion as they realized they had been outmaneuvered. Kale felt Zaraxis's quiet triumph through the link, a wave of satisfaction mixed with apprehension. They were free of the trap, free of the complex. But now they were exposed, two beings bound by a forbidden ritual, flying an ancient, legendary ship into the vast unknown. Their destination was unclear. Zaraxis couldn't return to the priesthood-controlled city. Kale had no home to speak of, just a failing terraforming project. He now cared little a doubt compared to the impossible reality he inhabited with Zaraxis. Their future was as undefined as the distant starfields stretching before them, but their bond was their compass. The twin stars were meant to find a path. Together, they navigated through the void, the silence of space filled with the constant, comforting presence of each other's consciousness. They talked, truly talked, for the first time without the immediate pressure of the trap or their pursuer. Kale shared stories of Earth, of human history, of his simple dream of making barren worlds bloom. Zaraxis shared the complex tapestry of her culture, the weight of her lineage, the ancient prophecies surrounding the twin stars, a pairing that occurred only in times of great crisis, destined to bring either salvation or destruction. Their bond, forged in necessity, deepened into something resonant and complex, a partnership built on shared vulnerability, mutual respect, and a love that defied logic in origin. There was no turning back. The ritual had made them one, not just in consciousness, but in destiny. They were twin stars, fugitives from a corrupted past, navigating towards an uncertain future. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and wonders, and they would face it together, side by side, their lives irrevocably bound by the trap, the ritual, and the love that had bloomed in the most unlikely of places. Their bond marks, invisible beneath their clothing now, thrummed with a steady, comforting rhythm, a silent promise of their enduring connection. They were a human and an alien, two halves of a forbidden whole, sailing among the stars, their shared heartbeat, a defiant pulse against the silence of the cosmos.